Hello, and welcome to the premiere, the first, and therefore, so far, the only edition of In Other News here on CAN TV. I'm your host, Robin Robinson. Here is where we get to talk about things that deserve more than 2 or 3 minutes. Talk with folks who have a certain truth, sometimes a hard truth. But my goal is to also find the joy, always, the fun that makes it all bearable. And let there be blackness, not to exclude anyone else, but to be sure we include the perspective that is too often left out and is very important to me. The people and events making news here, you may not see elsewhere, or if you do, maybe not through this lens. For this very first edition, my guest is a man who has a gift for helping people see the police from a different perspective. The backstory, he stepped into leadership during one of the most volatile periods in Chicago law enforcement after the reveal of 16 shots and a cover-up, the tragic police murder of 17-year-old Laquan McDonald in 2014. More importantly, the delay in releasing video of that shooting is what crippled the credibility of Chicago police leadership and arguably the tenure of former Mayor Rahm Emanuel. Superintendent Gary McCarthy was out, much to his surprise, and much to the chagrin of those involved in the official process of choosing a new top cop. The mayor chose a man who didn't even apply for the job. And he turned out to be one of the most popular and effective law enforcement leaders in recent history in Chicago. Has a way of relating to both the cops and the community. But then he got a new boss, and that relationship was complicated. Some say Lori Lightfoot felt threatened by the popularity of her police superintendent. On the other hand, maybe a new mayor should get to pick their own top cop, because after all, it's the mayor that gets blamed for police and safety and every other issue. Either way, he did pave the way for his own firing, asleep at the wheel at a stop sign and sleeping with a subordinate, a stellar career that flamed out in a firestorm of controversy. Or did it? Before you judge a book by the most salacious chapter you walked in on, remember that sometimes what don't kill you makes you better. So let's talk about the lows and the highs, the secrets cops keep, and the complex space between defunding the police and reimagining ways for police to help us create safer, more peaceful communities. Right after this break, a candid conversation with former Chicago Police Superintendent Eddie Johnson.
Hi, I'm Bianca Cotton. Join me Mondays at 7 p.m. for Behind the Confident Smile as I sit in conversation with incredible, dynamic, and complex Chicagoans who peel back the layers, living lessons, the joy, and the pain behind their confident smiles. You can watch on CAN TV 19, cantv.org, and CAN TV Plus app.
When he was selected as superintendent for the Chicago Police Department, the second largest police department in the country, Eddie Johnson had no idea about the interesting journey he was about to take. Well, maybe he did, though, because he's not new to this. Eddie joins us now, and I can call you Eddie now. I don't have to call you superintendent.
You can.
I used to call you boss. Full disclosure, we should let everybody know that you hired me when you first got to the Chicago Police Department's top job. You had been at the department for a long time, and we could talk about how that happened for another whole half hour, but we won't.
Okay.
But you hired me to, how did you put it, to help create a better relationship between the officers and the community.
And the police officers, right.
You said they trust you, so maybe you can help us build some trust. How long had you been in the Chicago Police Department before you became superintendent?
27 years. I had been a cop 27 years.
And you were pretty high up. You were a chief, right, or deputy chief. So you had a somewhat of an idea of how interesting this could be from the top, right?
Yeah, I tell you this, Robin. So I was a deputy chief and then a chief of patrol. And as deputy chief, I was probably as close to the Superintendent McCarthy at the time that you can be, but I still didn't know exactly what it was to be superintendent until I actually got in that chair.
Because then you're standing between, you have a boss who is the mayor.
Correct.
And how many thousands of people below you?
Well, 13,000 sworn and about 4,000 civilians.
Right, because let's be clear, you hired me, but I never became a cop. I was a civilian. So things were going pretty well for the first few years. When Rahm Emanuel lost the election, and Lori Lightfoot was elected. You weren't her superintendent.
Yeah, what people don't know is that Lori and I had a relationship prior to her becoming mayor. You could almost say we were friends. We would meet once a month. Nobody knew that back then, but we would meet once a month just to talk about things involving the Black community and the police department. Yeah, a lot of people didn't know that.
Because her position before becoming mayor was as a prosecutor, wasn't it?
No, she was chairman, head of the police board for quite a while.
Okay.
But before that, she was also with OPS, a civilian entity that had a little oversight over the police department. So we had known each other for years. But I have to be honest, now I can say this. I think, although we were friends and acquaintances, and when we were going through the consent decree, she and I met a lot because I needed another set of eyes to look at it other than the city attorneys. And so I turned to her. People didn't know that. But I think once she became mayor, I think she always looked at me as Rahm Emanuel's superintendent. And I'm okay with that because I think a mayor should be able to pick and choose whomever they feel most comfortable with.
Except, as you and I have discussed, if you're trying to make real change, it takes longer than 4 years.
Oh, yeah.
And that's how long a mayor's term is guaranteed to be. You might get 2, but you probably need the whole 8 or 10 years to really make significant change in an organization like a police department.
Yeah, if you listen to academia and civilian experts around the country, they'll tell you in a large police department such as Chicago, it takes from 5 to 7 years to turn the culture around. And in that 5 to 7 years, you have to have pretty much the same police chief or superintendent that believes in that cultural change to effectively do it.
I remember you once described it as trying to turn the Titanic in a river. Okay, trying to make a U-turn in a river.
Yeah.
So when the opportunity came for Mayor Lightfoot to fire you, that was you made it easy for her. So you had an incident where you were pulled over, a block from not pulled over. You were sitting still,
right,
a block from your home,
correct,
and asleep behind the wheel, apparently.
Yeah. So I wasn't fired. I was demoted.
Because she couldn't fire you.
She couldn't fire me because I think she thought she could, but she couldn't.
She said she did,
right,
and then she had to go back on it. Okay.
No, I was demoted back to my civil service rank, which was lieutenant. But getting back to that incident, I was about 2 blocks from home. And what people don't know about that particular evening, I had been out drinking, not a lot, but I had a kidney transplant, if you recall. Mm-hmm. And that very day, earlier that day, my doctor called, my nephrologist, and he had me change some medications. And so what happened was I took the old medications out, but I didn't put the new stuff in, because I didn't have it at my office. That's where he called me, and I just didn't have it. But to be quite honest, and look, you've known me some time now, I'm a pretty straight shooter. I made an error in judgment that night. I did, and I owned that. Mm-hmm. I had fell asleep. I had been out with a subordinate who I was having an affair with. So I was wrong in that regard.
You were wrong in every which way.
Yep,
Mm-hmm.
but that one night didn't define my career. But I pulled over, not because I was drunk. I pulled over because I was trying to give myself a little time before I went home. Oh. And that's why I pulled over. And people didn't know that. And there was nobody in the car with me. I was by myself. But what's really hurtful to me personally about that whole thing was that the mayor said that I lied to her, and I didn't lie to her, because quite frankly, I got to be honest with you, it wasn't any of her business if I was having an affair. I did not.
Except that it was with a subordinate.
Right.
Okay.
So now, I didn't tell her who I was with that evening, but here's the ironic part about the story. I did tell her enough so she would know what happened, and I didn't lie about it. I may not have told her who I was with, but the ironic part is when they conducted that investigation, and look, by that time I had been a cop for 31 years. I have never seen where an investigation is conducted within the police department or the inspector general's office, and the accused party is available, but they never interviewed me.
If they didn't come and the investigators didn't come and ask you what happened?
I was never interviewed. People think that they figured out where I was at that night. They didn't figure that out. I told them where I was at. People around the city told me they were all over looking for where I was that night, they had no clue. I told them where I was.
But they didn't interview, so how did you tell them?
Well, when you're formally charged, they'll ask you different questions.
Okay.
And I told them that I had been to that place that night. But they never interviewed me, so they didn't conduct a complete investigation. Because had they done that, they would have found out that I was with some other friends too that night. But they never bothered to actually interview me.
So you pulled over and fell asleep. You weren't asleep sitting at the stop sign in
Correct.
the roadway.
Correct.
Okay, all right. It's good to clarify those things. Now, the subordinate later accused you of wrongdoing and sexual harassment.
Assault.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And you said no, this was consensual, and they did go to court.
It did.
And
so it went to court. She accused me, of course, of sexually assaulting her for essentially 4 years, which wasn't the case. It was a consensual relationship. It went to court, and the federal judge went to federal. It was a federal lawsuit. The federal judge tossed it out, saying that the overwhelming evidence is that it was a consensual relationship, and that she saw no wrongdoing on my part.
Not to denigrate the person who made this accusation, but it would seem that there were some other motivations there, not wanting to have to work anymore, maybe.
Absolutely. I take ownership of what I did. So it's not my place to disparage someone else or anything like that. But what people don't know about that is that she and I met a couple times after all that happened, while she had filed that lawsuit. So if I were sexually assaulting her, do you think she would have been meeting with me like that? No.
It's all. None of it really adds up, except to equal a grievous error in judgment. So,
Absolutely.
So, what I was saying, if whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger or better, what is the outcome for you?
You know what? I tell you, Robin. I think that during that time, because let's face it, I still had to deal with my wife, my family, but I think in times like that, you beat yourself up more than anybody else ever could. And so what it did do, it made me look to God more. It also gave me a platform to talk to other folks of leadership and to share that story with them and to tell them to be very careful of the choices you make. And my son and I talk a lot. He's a lot more religious than I am, and I give his mother total credit for that. I do, however, I am a man of faith and a God-fearing man, and we talk a lot about what I was supposed to learn from that, because I never asked, why did that happen? What I would always ask is, what was I supposed to learn? Yeah. And I think I found an answer to that.
In the police department, there seems to be, I don't want to stereotype people, but there's misbehavior caused by, some would say, the stressful job. What I found when I started working around, I just never thought I would be in a situation where I'd go to work every day and everybody in the building got a gun, right? That's just not where I pictured it. And what I found was these were human beings with amazing motivation to do what they did, right, for the most part, but also stressed the hell out.
Yes.
The secrets that I think are not so secret anymore that cops keep. What would you say is the most damaging?
The secrets that cops keep, I think, are because of the stressors of the job. Because remember, their job is to go out for 8 hours a day and to solve everybody else's problems. But then when they get home, guess what? They have a lot of the same problems that everybody else has. So I think that one of the secrets is to cops mask the stress with humor, alcoholism. The divorce rate in cop marriages is through the roof. Alcoholism is through the roof. Suicides is through the roof. And it's because, when people see cops laughing at a
crime scene,
they take it the wrong way. They're not laughing about what happened. That's a coping mechanism because they deal with this stuff every day.
They say, I was reading the other day that there are now 19 sworn counselors within CPD. It feels like when we were there was something like 3.
There were 3 at the beginning, and we paved the way to bringing in those 19 or those additional counselors.
And cops would, at that time, for all up until recently, they'd have to say, I need to go see somebody. I need some mental health assistance. Imagine how often they said that, like never.
Yeah.
So now it is required after certain situations. You almost
Correct.
have to make them. I could just hear it now. Well, I don't want to go talk to this shrink, but I have to when that's what they actually really need.
Right, and it took a long time of chipping away at that hard infrastructure that cops develop over a period of time. And one of the ways we were able to do it, because I wanted them to start feeling comfortable seeking help. Mm-hmm. And one of the ways that we did it, myself and the command staff put together a video. We had a powwow one day after, and I hate to bring this up because it's tough to still to this day. One of the reasons I kind of hesitated about becoming superintendent is because, and I told the mayor, Rahm Emanuel, this, it's difficult when you have a cop that passes away on your watch, gets killed on your watch. That's tough. Mm-hmm. And Edward Marmaleo and Comrade Gary were hit by the train, remember? On the south side.
Way south, like Roseland.
Yep. And as a result of that, I talked to our head of psychiatry, Dr. Sobo. And we put together this massive meeting with all the command staff so we could just talk about the trauma. Because if you remember, myself and the command staff retrieved the body parts of those two officers so that their colleagues wouldn't have to do it.
It was all white shirts, as they call you.
Correct.
All, that were out there on the railroad tracks.
On the railroad tracks at 2 in the morning. But I thought at the time that it was important for us to do it to show leadership, as well as I didn't want their colleagues to have to suffer that trauma because they knew them on a personal level.
But the resistance to getting help for the trauma or PTSD or whatever you want to call it is very deep.
Oh, yeah.
We had, in my office, we had a Bright Star Community Outreach had offered to train, what's the district over there, by Bright Star Church, Pastor Chris Harris. No. But okay, it's going to come to me. But anyway, she had experienced something that made her think that everybody, all her cops needed to talk to someone about trauma and how they're feeling. And Bright Star offered to do it and for free. And we did it on the, like the overnight shift. And someone actually went to the union and said, do I have to do this? Right. Okay, so there was, as if it were harming them, there's a reason. It's like, it's as if telling them they're less than. So do you think we're going in the right direction now? Do you think that recognizing that police officers are actually not Marvel super beings? Yeah.
And not to sound pat us on the back, because a lot of things that I was able to accomplish was because of you all, and you in particular. And so I think we were on the right path back then to get it where we want. I think the superintendent now is trying to push it in the same direction. So I think the CPD leadership has the right thought process. I just think the red tape at City Hall is preventing that. My vision was to make it so we had enough professionals so that they would be designated to certain units and they would go out to those units periodically so the cops would get to know them on a more personal level, thereby being more apt to talk to them when they actually needed it.
Well, talking to people, having conversations, that was the premise of the Office of Restorative Justice, which is what I led.
Right.
And it was just basically getting officers together with the community members. Every relationship starts with a conversation.
Right.
When people aren't even talking to each other, if I walk down the street and I pass by a cop in uniform and I speak to him, I want him to speak to me back.
Right.
Really, I want him to speak to me first, but you told me we couldn't mandate that. But I mean, and part of the reason I understand is because they don't know what kind of response they're going to get.
Exactly.
Because the relationship is so tense.
Right.
People, especially black people, especially in certain neighborhoods, there's no love lost.
They just don't trust the police. And I have to tell you, my entire career was focused on making that a better situation. People knew I grew up in Cabrini Green, and we didn't see black cops back then. We only saw white cops. But I can tell you this, we could see Officer O'Shaughnessy coming around the corner.
And you would run, you'd
we
scatter.
gone. Mm-hmm. But when we saw Officer Williams coming around the corner, We're like, hey, because he got it, So I think we are heading in the right direction. I think the progress has been slowed a bit now, because when you bring in people from other cultures and you drop them into a community that they don't understand, have no knowledge of, they tend to resist it or fear it. And that's what you have to crack. You have to crack that resistance on both sides.
Build those relationships is what I was always preaching. It wasn't always appreciated, but you always had my back. So what's next for you?
It's funny you ask me that. Listen, I'll be honest and tell you this. So I've been retired now about 3 years, and but my cop brain won't turn off. And so I still feel like I have a lot to give in terms of public service. So don't be surprised if you see me out here in some form or fashion trying to help this city get back on the right track, because I do believe there's a lot still to be done. I think we were going in the right direction. I think it's been stalled, and I want to see the mayor succeed desperately, because if he succeeds, then we succeed. But it's just, I'm in the communities almost every day, and Black people stop me wherever they see me and ask me different questions like that. I was on WVON about a month or so ago, and a couple ladies called in and said, boy, we were really wishing you would run for mayor. And I appreciate.
I told them to call. No.
I appreciate that, but a few years ago, my mind just wasn't, I had to get this legal stuff behind me. Today is a new day.
That's right.
So I am here to still serve the city of Chicago in whatever capacity I can.
Well, I really appreciate that. I've always thought the interviewer had too much power. So is there anything you want to ask me?
So when you came into the police department, how did your view of it differ from when you left?
Oh, it was so different. Police have a way of putting up a shield, and then when you get to know them, and of course, I can't say they, because that's not all of them, but I want to say 95%, most of the people I met, and some of the ones that weren't nice, I said, you're going to age out in a minute anyway, right? They were old school. They were giving, caring. They got into this to help people. The one thing that I know we worked on was recruitment, tried to get more African Americans to become police officers. That was tough to do, but I think that makes a huge difference, as you said. The cop that's coming at you, either with a bond versus someone who's coming at you with like an enforcement mindset.
That's right.
And it makes a huge difference. Because I was a little scared going in there at first, and I made a couple of remarks that I didn't realize were going to be offensive. But like I said, you always had my back. But people, once they realize that, hey, I'm really here to try to improve the relationship, not to try to say who's more right, who's more wrong. It's all wrong right now. But by themselves, police are not going to be able to keep us safe. I appreciate the efforts that are happening right now to address, the educational, the economic, all those things that go into it.
It matters.
But the police have to be part of the solution.
Exactly.
They can't just be the people you call, when the monster's at the door.
That's exactly right.
So I appreciate that opportunity. I really do.
Well, I may have never told you this, but I appreciate you changing my viewpoint on some things. We would go back and forth on some things.
Because you cops are hard-headed. But I understand that, and I think everybody should take a break every now and then. So now you've had a break, so we'll wait to see what happens when you come back. I really appreciate you joining me, because I told you, even though I'm your dear friend, I got to ask the hard questions.
Not a problem.
And you have always been one to give the answers. Thank you.
Straight shooter.
Eddie Johnson. On the other side of the break, I'm back with this week's edition of Robin's Nest. Stay with us.
CAN TV is the lens through which Chicago's stories are told, harnessing the unifying power of community television. With CAN TV On Demand, immerse yourself in the richness of our city through exclusive stories and programs tailored just for you, connecting you to the heartbeats of our streets, the voices of our people, and the spirit that makes Chicago unique. Discover the strength of your community on CAN TV On Demand.
I have to shout out my thanks again to former Chicago Police Superintendent Eddie Johnson for joining me this evening. And I'd like to think tonight's conversation was fair and friendly, but that doesn't take away from the idea that uncomfortable conversations, even in the best environments, can still be just that, uncomfortable. And thanks to you for watching or listening in, however you're experiencing in other news. If you want to be a little more interactive, I welcome your comments, ideas, your questions, whatever you have to say, I'm here for it. Of course, you can comment right here on the CAN TV YouTube platform, but if you want to say something in private, don't call me. The telemarketers have that on lock. But do send me an email if you'd like, robinsothersnews@gmail. My final thoughts are the feelings I've been mulling over in Robin's nest, ready to hatch into ideas I hope you might want to consider. What does it mean to be safe? Arguably, it means everything, and everything we need leads to safety. Without stable housing, we are not safe. Without access to quality education, nutrition, healthcare, employment, we're not safe. Yet we boil safety down to a policing responsibility and then exclude police from our lives like they're from another planet. To look at safety only through the data can be a trick, too. It's a shape changer. It's only been for about the last quarter century that the official numbers of the bad stuff, the murders, rapes, robberies, carjackings, burglaries, etc., have been required to be made public. But then you try to divide and conquer by those details. Which of those crimes were committed with a firearm, involved an underage victim or perpetrator, happened between strangers or people who knew each other, was gender-based violence? Those numbers can make your eyes glaze over. But one thing that is consistent and without challenge is the racial disparity, what some people call the color of crime. A disproportionate number of victims, a far disproportionate number of victims and alleged perpetrators of harm are Black people. No, Chicago is not the murder capital of the country, but we are the poster child of racialized crime data because this is one of the most efficiently segregated cities in the nation. The outcomes of that segregation will be a frequent theme to explore here in Other News, which is why we are starting with safety, because without that, without peace, nothing else can truly succeed. Trying to figure out exactly what the role of police has been, should be, or could be in helping to keep the peace is a piece of the puzzle that means life or death, not just literally dying, but living a life that has no hope or reasonable prospects for a future worth working toward, dying slowly. Consider why some young people would rather stand up and be cut down than live on their knees. Rather than face that slow death, they risk and they inflict violence. We'll be talking in future broadcasts about why it is young people are more likely to make that devil's bargain. So I leave you with the idea that there is a danger in the single story, the grouping of people as others, letting a stereotype define who you either fear and hate or love and respect. When you hear about people who have a code of silence, who are always on the lookout for trouble, who have no choice or voice in the rules they must follow to survive, who dare not risk snitching on one another, who never know how they're going to be received or perceived, people who step into danger on a regular basis. Who am I talking about? Is it the cops? Or is it my own Black son or yours? There's a lot more we have in common than I think we realize. Truth, fun, blackness. Next time, I promise we'll have more fun in Other News. Thanks for joining us.